Gary? Well, at least it's a room of people I know, Bob.
It's a friendly room.
Short timer G. I've heard from Steve, usually will tell me personally.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Last time I signed something for that at my desk,
So you're getting this is old news, is that what you're
yes, that's not super.
Yeah, so we're gonna do just a live one from there's first half
Yes, yes.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, it's half past the hour and time to call to order this meeting of the Columbia Gateway Urban Renewal Agency Board. Roll call, please, Paula.
Linda Miller.
Here.
Stacy Coburn.
Here.
John Frederick.
Here.
Gary Grossman.
Here.
Scott Baker.
Here.
Darcy Lon Curtis.
Here.
Steve Kramer is absent. Tim McLaughlin.
Here.
And Bob Delaney.
Here.
Thank you.
Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Members of the agency board have all received, or should have received, agenda in mail. I would entertain any changes or additions to the agenda or motion to approve as submitted.
I'll move to approve the agenda as submitted.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All those in favor signify by raising your right hand
Thank you.
or left hand. I don't know what changes. I don't think it changes the vote. Motion passes. We have also received in the mail minutes of previous meetings. Again, we would deal with any additions, corrections, or I would entertain a motion to approve.
I'll move to approve the minutes as presented.
I'll second.
It's been moved and seconded. All those in favor, please raise your hand. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. It is now time for public comment. If there is any comment from the public attending this evening, do we have anyone that wishes to speak? Seeing no one leaping to the microphone, we will move on to the presentation dealing with the EPA Brownfield Study Grant, and I suspect that will be Steve and Matthew. Or Matthew only, I don't know. Matthew only.
I expect a rousing introduction.
It's a solo performance
By Mr. Harris.
for the legend, the man, Matthew,
Careful, which
please.
sport, right? So I just wanted to take a couple minutes of your meeting tonight to give you an update on the EPA Brownfield grant that we've been moving forward with. As you may recall, late last year, earlier this year, we finished a project with an integrated planning grant from Business Oregon for $25,000. And that was a study focusing on the urban renewal area, which includes the downtown core, as well as property out along West 2nd Street to the north of I-84. That initial project with Business Oregon funding was to initially inventory and rank some potential brownfield sites that we have in that core target area. And so that was essentially an effort to do our homework, to prove and show that we have a significant number of potential brownfield sites. We have some opportunity sites, and that would lead us up to this EPA application. This EPA grant application is for a coalition assessment grant, and the coalition members are confirmed now as the Port of the Dalles and Wasco County. And so having 3 coalition members allows us to ask for the maximum grant award offered under the EPA for coalition assessment grants, which is up to $600,000. So we put out a RFP to procure a consultant who will be writing or assisting us in writing that grant application for free. And contingent upon award, they would then help us execute that project. We put the RFP out for 30 days and we got back a response and selected that consultant. That's the company Stantec, which is also the same company that did the integrated planning grant. So they have great experience. They've already kind of been out here. They know our community. They worked with us on that previous project. So the coalition assessment grant, the $600,000, will essentially be used to do specific site assessments on the properties identified through the previous project, but also different opportunity sites throughout the community. So that initial inventory and ranking shows a workload or a work plan that we can focus on, but we're not restricted to that. If there's an opportunity site that is outside the bounds of the Urban Renewal Agency, we certainly want to approach that and take that into consideration. But that initial work and focus shows that we have X number of sites that may need remediation work and that we are worthy of the grant from the EPA. And the funds can be used for specific site assessment, phase 1, phase 2, really involving the scoping, soil testing, figuring out if there are tanks under the ground, for example, how many tanks are there, coming up with a real defined scope of work to be able to estimate the cost of what that remediation would be. And once we have that information, we potentially go on to the next phase, or that private property owner or public agency owner would go on to the next phase, which would be to secure grant or loan funds from Business Oregon, from the EPA, from the Urban Renewal Agency perhaps, or other sources of revenue to mitigate that concern. The project may also include what's called area-wide planning. So that would look at a particular area and address the brownfields or brownfield concerns in that general area. And that may coincide nicely with the underground utility study that we are exploring, as well as the west side area plan that the planning department is looking into. As a side note, the utility undergrounding feasibility study is an RFP that was put out just a couple weeks ago and will be closing in early December. And so hopefully the timing of these efforts work out quite nicely. I wanted to stress that the inventory, again, like I said, kind of gives us the guidelines for this project, but we're not restricted to it. And the both public and private property identified in that inventory or in future efforts, there's no requirement by the property owner to participate. So if we have the top 10 sites identified through the process that we went through, we go to site number 3 and that private property owner says, thanks but no thanks, that's perfectly fine, we'll move on down the list. And that's why we started with that top 10 listing, but I believe the entire inventory has over 100 different potential sites. So it kind of focuses our efforts, and then we'll kind of proceed forward from there. And again, some of the objectives here are to maximize the use of the employment lands that we have, increase the tax base, as well as improve the public health conditions that we have here. It not only includes petroleum or oil leaks or anything like that, but as well as lead and asbestos. So with that, I'd like to answer any questions that you may have, but my intent tonight was really to give an update on where we're at in the process. The application due date is December 4th, so it's getting quite close, and we'll be submitting that application soon.
Any questions from the agency?
Okay.
Looks like you're home free.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for the report and for the Halloween candy. Good of you. We are now preparing to go into executive session. The Columbia Gateway Urban Renewal Agency will now meet in executive session in accordance with ORS 192-660 to E to conduct deliberations with persons designated by the governing body to negotiate real property transactions. Representatives of the news media and designated staff shall be allowed to attend the executive session. Representatives of the news media are specifically directed not to report on any of the discussions or deliberations during the executive session, except to state the general subject of the session as previously announced. So I won't. No decision may be made in the executive session. At the end of the executive session, we will return to open session and welcome the audience back into the room. We have 3 people that we might consider having at executive session. Now and in the future, the agency board needs to approve those people that may have interest in staying for the executive session. The people interested in staying would be Mayor Rich Mays, Brian Lauterbach, who represents our property, and Matthew Cleaves, who has had some involvement with the property under discussion. So is it at the will of the agency to have these people attend, or is there any objections?
No objection.
No objections? Okay, we would need to ask everyone else to excuse themselves, please, other than those involved in the property transactions, which would be Chris, you can stay, Brian and Peggy, Charlie and Ed.